Welcome, Eryn, to the Biohacker Babes podcast. Thanks for joining us today in your lovely podcast studio, not at home. We're happy you're not at home.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm also happy I'm not at home with what's going on there. I have some mold exposure at home, but thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, lovely to chat. We've been trying to get you on for a little bit, and today is the day. So you have made like a pretty amazing stamp on the biohacking technology world. You're really helping a lot of companies soar. We're huge believers of data and using wearables to reveal blind spots for our own health journeys. And you've had a lot of eye-opening moments discovering like some powerful opportunities for healing for yourself to optimize your mental health. And now you're going through a fertility journey. So we're really excited to go through all of your experience and wisdom. But I'm the most excited about blood sugar and mental health. So I want to start there. The beginning of your biohacking journey, you were on an anxiety medication. And then you discovered that you had some blood sugar dysregulation. How did you discover this connection? Like, what was the way in for you?
Yeah, for me, it came as a complete shock. My history is I was raised healthy, doing gymnastics, dance, eating healthy. And, it wasn't until later in life when I started learning about wearables and put on a CGM for the first time that I really was like, wait, hold on. I had been on anxiety medication for a while. And before that, ADHD medication since I was in middle school. And I always thought like, oh, I'm got this neurodegenerative stuff going on and I'll probably have to be medicated my whole life. But it wasn't until I wore a CGM that I actually saw, wait, when I'm in the red and my blood sugar is really low is when I'm having panic attacks, I'm sweating, heart palpitations, and racing thoughts, and all of this panic and anxiety. So if that correlates and I balance that out, could I get off of meds? And that's really where this all started for me. It was a 10-month journey. It wasn't an easy process of figuring sort of my body out and unique things that spiked me. But I would say that was my start. And for me, that correlation, once I saw it repeat, there was no unseeing it. And I tried going to my doctor and saying, like, hey, I know it's like typical cliche thing. I'm noticing every time my blood sugar is really low, I'm feeling this way. Can I get a CGM? No, CGMs are really only for people who have uncontrollable glucose that are diabetic and on insulin. You don't have that, so you're fine. So I just kept buying it out of pocket. And over this 10-month journey, really what helped me was to be able to see which things were spiking me, because those were usually the things that had a correlative crash. It wouldn't go down without it going up first. And I'd eat something that I thought was healthy, like a Belvita bar, high fiber breakfast bar, which is really just a naked carb that's been marketed as something else. But I would spike really high, crash really low, feel really terrible, and start the whole process over again. Once I started identifying which foods were spiking me and crashing me, I started to, through ketogenic lifestyle really for a while, balance that out and got off of medication within about 10 months.
Wow. And was your physician supportive of that, of tapering off the medication at that point?
I don't even think they asked me about it. I just
Like,
stopped picking it up. It would be cool if they were monitoring that, but they really weren't. I just stopped picking it up. So yeah.
Yeah.
And then
You
it
were
was
really
game-changing.
an advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it became game-changing for my family. I guess I called myself the CGM fairy after that. I started slapping them on my mom, my stepdad, my husband, and saw my husband was pre-diabetic. My stepdad was type 2 diabetic with a fasting blood sugar in the 200s. And then I started to be like, so many people are having blood sugar issues around me that would never have known if they weren't able to check. And there's no diagnostics kind of going into, I mean, other than the glucose tolerance test, which really is just showing how quickly it comes down, not really how your baseline is or general, metabolic health overall is going. So that was really sort of like drinking the Kool-Aid in the biohacking scene for me. That kind of rocked my world and trickled into my family too, because I changed my kids' diets. I changed the way that our whole family was eating. And like I said, my husband started testing, then he kind of got into the keto thing, got his blood sugar down. And that was really it for us. Once we felt better and started to see the results with the way our kids were behaving, and people were asking us like, what parenting book are you doing? Your kids like never fight. It's like, oh no, it's their diet. So, that's a whole nother thing too, that we don't really think about is how much that impacts their mood if it's impacting ours. So
Yeah. All like the ADD and ADHD and hyperactivity and stuff in kids. Yeah, that could be huge. And it sounds like CGM is almost like it's like the gateway drug into like optimizing your health. Because it's like once you start seeing that, you want to just optimize everything around it. And I'm like thinking back to when I was in high school, I used to have panic attacks all the time.
Mhm.
Actually, like ended up in the ER once or twice from the panic attack. And man, do I wish I could go back and like see what my blood sugar was doing. And this was like this is 25 years ago. So CGMs definitely weren't a thing back then. But um, I would guess I probably had some like reactive hypoglycemia at the time. So really cool that you
Yeah.
got to see that data. So I'm curious for anyone that maybe is struggling today with anxiety, would you just say go ahead and put a CGM on, or is there something that they should consider before jumping to that?
Absolutely. I think so. And I know Dr. Chris Palmer is talking a lot about the correlative data between mental health concerns with depressive disorders, as well as anxiety and even BPD and things like that, and metabolic wellness, and how, those are so correlated. And I
Mm.
think that first, you kind of got to go through it. A checklist is like, what is going into my body that might be impacting? Because like you just said, essentially, it could be not a mental health issue. It could be a metabolic issue that's leading to mental health symptoms. And so wearing that and seeing and just kind of ruling it out is a helpful start, especially if, it's something you've noticed you've been struggling with, or you feel really tired after meals. That's another, red flag to look for is like, how far after my meal do I start to feel off? And it's usually a couple hours. So in your mind, you don't think it's correlated. It's not right after. It takes a while for your body to break down the carbohydrates, lift the glucose, and then crash it back down. That's like generally speaking, a 2-hour time frame where that glucose curve would happen. So if you notice you're really tired after meals, or you're craving food even just like 2 hours after eating, those are some red flags that I would say perhaps you should put on a CGM and see if there's what is called the glucose roller coaster that's driving these feelings.
I couldn't
Yeah,
agree more
good
because I
point.
find a lot of people don't feel these things. So you really need the visual data to reveal that blind spot. And I think we know what it feels like to have low blood sugar, but most people don't know what it feels like to have high blood sugar until you see it. Why would you correlate the two? And it really is. I agree again about the mental health connection. If we are creating inflammation and we are creating insulin resistance, and there's an impact on leaky gut and the microbiome, like, of course, we're in a mental health epidemic. Of course, we're setting the stage for that. So I agree. It's like the most non invasive, other than there's a tiny little filament that goes in your arm. It's like pretty non invasive, and we can start to fix behaviors right away.
Yeah, especially compared to like finger pricking. I did that for a while too,
Oh,
and only so much space. I
your
really
poor
feel
fingers.
all the
Yeah.
time.
All the
Yeah,
band-aids.
Hmm.
yeah. And sometimes I
Yeah.
forget it's there, I will like take off something really quickly, or, a backpack strap or something, and shoot the thing across the room because it feels like a sticker. You really do forget that it's
Yeah.
on once you get kind of used to it. So
Yeah.
definitely I would say it's a more passive and easy way to keep track of all of that without continuous pain.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So once someone has a CGM, because I think we all agree that that's what people should do, maybe you can share some biohacks around optimizing, because obviously it's very personal, right? You're going to start to learn
Yes.
which foods that maybe you should completely avoid, but maybe there are certain foods that we want to keep in. Like, what biohacks have you found to be helpful to offset this roller coaster ride?
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head. Something to consider whenever you're, I think, tracking your own personal health data is bioindividuality. You're going to not be the same as the next person, which is why cookie cutter meal plans and things like that tend to not work, generally speaking. And what I found for me is I spike on totally different things than other people do, like my husband. There actually was a study done by Zoe in partnership with Cleveland Health, and they looked at 3,000 identical twins who are copy paste genetically, right? And they found that even these identical twins spike on different things. And they correlated that to differences in microbiome and lifestyle. So if genetic copies of each other need different foods and spike on different things, what does that say for the rest of us? So I agree completely. You need to look at yourself individually and see what spikes you. I like to do kind of the process of elimination. Have repeat days where you're eating the same thing for breakfast, lunch, and dinner a couple days in a row. And then you can kind of see like, is breakfast spiking me? Or is it when I had my coffee? Or did I have a stressful conversation? Because those things also impact your blood sugar. Eating at your desk in front of your laptop while you're working, that can also be like a compounding stressor that can increase your blood sugar. Whereas if you had that exact same meal in a de-stressed and deep breathing state and like a rest state, then you will see less of an increase, because the cortisol, the stress hormone, can also impact and raise blood sugar in tandem with the food. So there's lots of different things you can look at. The first thing would be eliminating stuff. I actually had what I thought was like a lowish carb protein powder that I was having every morning in my smoothie, and it was spiking me. And I didn't know it at first. I thought, okay, maybe it's the blueberries I'm putting in here. Maybe it's the milk. I'll switch to almond. And then it was still spiking me. So finally I switched the protein powder out, and it was the protein powder, even though the nutrition panel didn't show it. For whatever reason, that protein powder was spiking me. So trust your body more than you trust the nutrition panel. I mean, there's other foods I found out there on my glucose journey, like Smart Sweets or others, and I don't really want to badmouth the brand, but that spiked me as high as like Trolley gummy bears. So it may say X net carb, but your body may respond as if it's just a straight carb. So don't just trust the nutrition panel, trust your body first, and then swap little things out to see what changes. And when you eat, de-stress. And if you are going to have something that's maybe higher carb, you can play with exercise timing. I find if I do like a bit of sprints, even just a half-mile sprints, and then I have like a banana with some peanut butter, doesn't spike me at all compared to if I had banana with peanut butter, just sitting down and without having a timed workout with it. So there's lots of tips there that you can try.
Yeah. Or just having more muscle mass in general. It's like such a great strategy. Let's lift some weights, because your muscle's going to take care of a lot of that. Yeah. Thank you for those tips. So beyond maybe your blood sugar data, anything else behavioral to help with anxiety? Because it is just so pervasive these days. It's like kids are having panic attacks. I know, Renee, you said you had them when you were young, but it's so common now for young adults to be having panic attacks and anxiety.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, I mean, obviously nutrition. Another is sleep. And I think all of us in our early 20s probably like, yeah, I had so much anxiety, so much, maybe depression or just more moodiness, but we're probably out late. We're probably adding alcohol to the mix. We're probably over caffeinating. We're probably not eating a balanced diet. And that's a recipe for some, chaos.
Oh yeah.
So, I find for other aspects of looking into manage stress and anxiety would probably be sleep timing. I know that's kind of a big thing talked about, but breath work too. And even still, I think breath work is a major thing to recognize. Also, when you notice tension in the body, like do a body scan of like when you start to have those tension moments. This is something you do with your kids too, is when you notice their hands clench or their face change, you say, where are you feeling some pressure in your body? And calling that out to the brain kind of flags it so that you can address it. And part of at least cognitive behavioral therapy is to like thank your body for that reaction, because it's trying to protect you. And when you thank it, it's like your body lets go of it, because like, okay, they're aware, they've acknowledged, and now we're good. And then you can breathe through it and kind of get out of that state. But yeah, I think for me, it was definitely, I mean, it doesn't mean I'm free of any stress or anxiety these days, that I kind of balanced my glucose and got off of meds. But I do find all of those physiological things that I couldn't really stop from happening by doing breath work and all these other things, like heart racing, shaking, brain fog, snapping, because I couldn't really focus. Those were gone. And then it was just the stressor and being able to get back in tune with my body to get through those moments, as opposed to, being stuck sort of in those physical feelings that keep you in that state.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad that you mentioned sleep. I think sleep is huge for this, but at the same time, I find a lot of people with anxiety can't sleep. They lay in bed and they're just like, I'm sleeping 2-3 hours. So breath work is obviously a really good one for that. I don't know. Did you ever have trouble sleeping with your anxiety?
Yes. Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely. And glucose lows while sleeping. So meal timing, this is a good point actually, because if I was eating too late in the evening, then my blood sugar would be rising just before bed and then crash around 2, 3 a.m. I would wake up thinking I had a nightmare. And I was like, oh, I've always had sleep issues. I've always kind of sleptwalked and had all of these like waking and talking in my sleep and just kind of dysregulated sleep as a result also of glucose issues. And then once I wore the CGM, it would start beeping in the night and I'd like wake up and I'd be like, oh, okay, so this is actually another correlative thing. When I eat late, for me, my blood sugar does its thing and then kind of dips in the night and then I wake up with a racing heart. I started turning off the alerts because I don't want to wake up to the phone beeping and,
Oh,
you know,
yes. Step
fixing
one.
that as possible. Yeah. So yeah, that's one. And then
Yeah.
also sleep hygiene. I've added frequency music and sort of like a hygiene routine, like 5 minutes before bed. It's not a huge 30-minute light candle sort of thing. It's really just like, all right, I'm ready for bed. I put on, you know, we have red lights throughout the house, so our house looks like a murder mansion all the time. The
Nice.
kids like with the red lights, you know. But
Love it.
I put on solfeggio frequency. I listen to that for a little bit, do a couple deep breaths. I wear earplugs at night. And then my body is now learned like, oh, that's the signal. We're ready for bed. I think that is like a little tiny thing you can do to kind of prep your brain for its rest time and then not eating close to bed. If you do, I mean, there are some nights where I'm traveling or something. I try to keep it just like protein and veggie. I find that helps too.
Mm. Yeah, that's
Great.
good. Yeah, I have to add with you said alcohol in there. I noticed with my CGM, well, I always knew I didn't sleep well when I drank alcohol. But then once I had the CGM, what I saw, even just like one glass of wine with dinner, my blood sugar would be steady through dinner. But then at like 2 or 3 a.m., I would get that drop on the CGM. I'd see that. And I would wake up, like you said, with like anxiety, kind of a racing heart, and then you can't fall back asleep. And I'm like, man, that alone is like not worth it to have that drink. But now you see it in the data and you're like, oh, no wonder my body was waking me up at 2 a.m. It's trying to save me. It's terrible though.
I think biohacking ruins alcohol. I'm a firm believer, like, if you become a biohacker, just know you're going to start really not liking alcohol anymore. Because once you see the data of like also the aura ring plus the blood sugar, you're just like, this is not worth it. And it takes a couple days to reset. And it's just, there's other things.
Yeah, you really start to resent it. It's like if you had conflict with a person in life and they wronged you, you're like, oh, you're going to avoid that person.
That's a good way
Alcohol
of putting
becomes
it.
the evil. Yeah. So what have you seen in Aura Ring? Let's continue this leveraging technology. What's been kind of revealing or eye-opening there?
Well, fun with alcohol, or not fun, depending on how you look at it, is that I find every time I drink that my HRV tanks, my deep sleep, which is usually almost 2 hours, which is kind of like, I guess, pretty great. It will go down to like 30 minutes and I may sleep like a rock or feel like I slept like a rock, but the quality of sleep, my HRV, my resting heart rate, even sometimes my temperature gets elevated because I'm processing that toxin. And as we know, like the liver is where our glycogen stores are, which is like our emergency fund of glucose, which is blood sugar. It can't utilize that emergency fund when we drink because the liver is also responsible for detoxifying the body and processing that alcohol out of our system. So I personally feel that that's probably why we see that glucose low, because our liver is processing toxin. It can't then convert the glycogen stores into energy to keep our glucose stable anymore. And because it's processing toxin, our heart rate's elevated because it's in process mode. And then, our temperature may go up, or, all of the other things that are getting this toxin out of our body instead of resting and repairing, which is what we're supposed to be doing at night. So I do feel that if I do drink, it's probably with brunch on a Saturday. It's a
good day drink. Yeah.
And it's very occasional. Yeah. But then at least I process it throughout the day and I can still get my good sleep at night. So
how
about you guys?
The body temperature, I totally see that too. And actually I use the Natural Cycles app to track my cycle because it syncs with the Aura Ring. And it's cool because in the morning it'll say, this is the body temperature we pulled from Aura. Do you want to like confirm it or whatever? But if it's elevated, like out of your range, it'll say, are you sick or hungover? And you can select one of the two, and then it will pull that temperature out so it doesn't skew the data. But I'm like, and sometimes I'm like, well, I had one drink, so I guess I'm hungover. I'm not really hungover, but like I select that just so the data doesn't get skewed. So body
Mm.
temperature is huge. And you can feel that when you sleep really hot
Oh, it's
too.
so
Yeah.
hot.
So hot.
Yeah.
So hot.
And drinking is just, you like feel sweaty and just like, this is not.
Have we
Yeah,
scared,
it's
have
not
we
worth
scared
it.
everyone?
I know, but it's like that 2 hour window when you first go to bed, when your body's really processing it. Even if the heart rate does drop in later stages, I find my readiness score is so impacted by those crucial like first few hours when we should be in deep sleep. And yeah, so for me, it's so not worth it. Ugh,
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's when
don't
my
like
body sprints through that deep sleep. It's, later in my later phases of sleep or later hours of sleep, I don't really get as much that during that period
Yeah.
in that window.
Yeah,
I love
that's
Aura.
huge.
I'm using Aura as well was using it last year a lot for cycle tracking and, stress tracking, which is their new cool feature on there, which is amazing. And, I've also seen now we're talking wearables and sort of the ability to kind of get into proactive health. With Heads Up Health, they're a group that allows doctors to do remote patient monitoring or utilize wearable device data, whether it's CGM or Aura or a smart blood pressure cuff or what have you, to use this in a proactive manner to detect certain things too, which I've not personally experienced, but I find mind-boggling that we're like at this phase of health intervention with technology. And one thing they actually found was one of the practices that was doing remote monitoring with Aura was able to detect a cardiac event before it actually happened to a patient and call them in, have them go to the hospital. And they went straight into a heart surgery because they were having an actual cardiac event. But that was before they had any major issues where an ambulance had to get them. They walked into the practice and went into a surgery. And
Do
I
you
know
know
we're
what they saw? Do you know what data they pulled?
I don't know, and I think that was like something they didn't it was
Just,
about the rhythm of the heart is what they
oh,
were
okay.
that was the
Okay.
data. Now about the actual diagnosis, they didn't share that particular piece of information, but
Okay.
it was serious enough of a cardiac event for them to go in and have surgery that day.
wow.
But to me, it's like we're talking about it for health optimization purposes. But in some cases, some folks can be using this for like later stage, proactive measures against a bigger issue, a much bigger issue. And I just feel like it's crazy that we're at this phase where we can do all of this and actually see inside of our bodies. When in the history of the world have we ever been able to not just like look at a nutrition panel, but actually be like, okay, the nutrition panel says this, but what is actually happening inside of my body and be able to see that and make decisions based on like what's behind the curtain. I'm
Oh,
fascinated.
Yeah.
it's amazing.
What's the
Yeah.
chemistry reaction that's going to happen? I mean, it's just
Yeah.
going to get better and better, right? We're going to become robots with a little panel on our wrist and we could just measure our electrolytes and insulin at all times. Like,
Can't wait for that.
it's a little scary, but I like
I'm ready
Renee
for
wish
it.
that retroactively we could go back and just be like, oh, at this time in my life when I was struggling with this, I wonder if I'd had more data points, if I could have put it together. It's great. We just have more puzzle pieces. We can really fill in the gaps here.
Absolutely.
What's your favorite metric on Aura? I'm just curious.
I think for me, my favorite, I guess my metrics that I like the best are my sleep stages because I find that really correlate. Obviously, your daily readiness, but for me, I'm kind of like how do I say? I sleep shorter amount than most people. I average about 6.5 hours, but I feel really optimal at that, 6.5 to 7 hours. So my daily readiness score is generally low because the length of time. But I find my deep sleep and my REM sleep is what tells me like this is going to be a good day where you can do lots of activity, as well as your temperature. You were talking about ovulatory cycle management and measurement with the algorithm paired with your self-reported data through Aura and Natural Cycles. Love that. I also love that the first time I ever saw that come through and it was like, you're going to start your period in the next 2 days. I was like, what? It can tell me what? I was like, that's amazing. Like how much you're about to go on a trip or something. Like, oh, you know what? I'm going to pack differently.
Oh,
Yeah.
Having that heads up is just so nice. Like,
Okay, I
that,
just had that happen. Like I ovulated a little late last month, but it picked up ovulation and it, like clockwork, it said in 14 days from today, you will get your period. And I was going to be away on a business trip. So I packed what I needed. And sure enough, that day it came and I had my stuff. So I was like, thank you, Aura.
Dang, Data.
nice.
But was that through natural cycles or Aura alone?
I have the pair, but I use it mostly in the Aura app. I don't usually use the natural cycles UI,
Right, but it pulls
but
through.
they pull
Because
through.
so
Yeah.
I don't use
Yeah.
natural cycles. I'm like, Renee, tell me everything. But I just use Aura and I find that the cycle tracking isn't super accurate. But I think what we can glean from it is the heart rate variability, sorry, the HRV, but also the heart rate fluctuations throughout the month and the body temperature. It's just so fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. I think they definitely have some room for improvement in regards to, especially when you add your dates in there of certain things, how it records. But
Yeah.
yeah, that and I was gonna say something else, but I can't remember what it was.
Well, I was going to chime
So
in
you
about
love the
what you
sleep
said
staging.
about the sleep is I think it's good to point out that with Aura, less time in bed or less time asleep is going to impact your readiness score, even if you are recovered. Like, I think
Mhm.
you feel good. You're waking up maybe without an alarm and you are recovered, but because it's only 6.5, 7 hours, Aura is going to hit you on that readiness score. And same thing with the other way. You could sleep 10 hours, not really be fully recovered, but Aura is going to give you a good readiness score because you slept so many
Mhm.
hours. So I think
Yes.
that's one thing like to keep in mind for Aura users. It does get skewed a little bit there.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I remember what I was gonna say, and it is for being a woman using Aura and ACGM. The beauty of that to me is like, or any, I also have used it in Nido. I've used other like hormone, like urine analysis tools that kind of give me my date ranges of like what my cycle length is, what phase I'm in, like the follicular or the luteal. Um, I've also found my carb tolerance during different phases of my hormone cycle totally fluctuates. And during certain phases, I'm like, ooh, I could definitely have more carbs right now because I'm in this phase and it's not going to really impact my baseline or my total glucose changes. But, at other phases, I have to dial that back and be more like fruit and veggie centric with my carbohydrates, less potatoes or things like that. So I don't know. Have you guys noticed the same thing, measuring both glucose and utilizing like hormone tracking?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And I was just going to give some context for the audience. If you're not familiar with the hormonal rise and fall, like we get the rise and fall of estrogen in the follicular phase, rise and fall of progesterone. I find with the CGMs, because we become a little more insulin insensitive in the luteal phase, but we also don't want to restrict the carbs too much. Like we do want to feed the progesterone. So it's kind of like a balancing act where like maybe your glucose is a little higher. We don't want to avoid completely, but what I found is when the hormones are low, then I have to be really careful. Is that when you're finding you have to pull back on things like potatoes?
Yes. Yeah, I do. And I also, it's fun because there's certain phases where I'm like, I can have a little more. I know there's more in my budget.
Yeah,
And husband will be like
totally.
jealous because he'll have the same thing I
Ah.
had and he'll have this like rise. But
Oh,
Is
man.
I
that
don't,
when estrogen is high, like estrogen and testosterone before ovulation?
yes.
For me,
Yeah.
that's my power time. I'm like, I
Yep.
can do it all.
Yep. And then, after ovulation, I have to dial it back and kind of,
Yeah.
but I also find that that's when I can work out harder and things like that too. So yeah.
Yeah, just gives us so
Powerful.
much permission as females.
Yeah. It's a superpower. We get to
Mhm.
intensify our carb load
Yeah.
during
Yeah.
certain phases. Yeah.
How has this
I love
trickled
it.
into your fertility journey?
Yeah, actually, that's a really, really great question. And kind of the history for me is last year I was working at a totally different role. My lifestyle was totally different. Some days I'd be gone 20 plus days of the month traveling for work. And I'm a mom
Mm.
of three, and my husband works on site. So there's like definitely other stressors involved with that. But we were trying to conceive for several months. It was about 6, 7 months that we were trying to conceive. And my glucose was fine. I started looking at my hormones and also doing cortisol testing and found my cortisol was like really off the charts and it was impacting my hormones. And when you don't have enough progesterone at the right time, you can't have an egg implant. And I was having that issue where I'd have chemical pregnancies. I'd test positive for a day, I'd be excited, I'd test positive another the next day, and then I'd test negative, and that would be that. And I think for me, glucose obviously is important for that because, when you have dysregulated glucose, it can lead to PCOS and fertility issues for that reason. But I had already healed my glucose journey with, over the span of the past few years. For me, then it was like, all right, what other factors may play a part into this? And I haven't officially announced it, but I will here. I'm pregnant now. So
Congratulations.
Yes, amazing.
And
Congrats.
what helped, thank you. For me, what helped was actually first, for a while, I was like, okay, what is wrong with my body? I'm like, I know I'm in my like mid 30s and what the stats are out there, kind of scary. It's like, if you're in your mid 30s, you have a 15% chance of getting pregnant every month. And you think that's really small. And maybe it's my body, or maybe I'm aging, or maybe I'm not doing something right. And I think instead of getting into that mindset, I think it's important to start thinking, okay, what environmentally is going on? And for me, it was my blood sugar was fine. For the most part, my hormones were fine. My cortisol levels were really high. My stress levels were really high. And I knew I was stressed with my job. So that was the first thing, was like, all right, I need to work on my stress, doing breath work and this and that, and kind of changing my environment. And then also I started researching into what other things have been impacting fertility. And then I saw this chart that was like really kind of heart dropping, because it was like showing from the 70s to now, the fertility decline. And it was correlating it with the introduction of plastics into our environment and talking about PFAs, or polyfluoroalkyls, and essentially that the introduction of these forever chemicals was impacting fertility, not just for women, but also for men. And that they're in houseware products like Tupperware, like drinking straws, clothing, underwear, grocery bags, like everything around us, carpet, fabric on your upholstery. And I started by throwing out the plastic. I dumped plastic. I got wood utensils and a wood cutting board. And I thought, okay, this is good. Switching to glass, this is good. And then I read, wait, your wood utensils could actually be coated in microplastics too, and polyfluoroalkyls too. So I was like, okay. I got together with a friend who she works for. She's actually a geologist, and she sends a bunch of soil and groundwater in for testing at these EPA labs. And I asked her, do you think an EPA lab would take some of my housewares and test them for these forever chemicals? She's like, yeah, I don't see why not. And sure enough, wood cutting boards, wood utensils contained these forever chemicals that the EPA is knowing are a hazard to human health and to fertility. And I thought, what in the heck is going on?
No, so
Oh
sad.
man. I want to get into more like hidden things, but I just read last week about the dishwasher tabs, the plastic ones, that's then shooting plastic all over your dishes in your dishwasher, and then you're eating off of them and you're consuming plastic in that way.
Yes.
Oh,
Also dryer sheets.
delicious.
Dryer sheets too.
I
They're
got rid of
hitting it
dryer
on the
sheets. Yeah, I got rid of dryer sheets. I got rid of the bad laundry detergent, but the dishwasher tabs was the next one for me. I'm like, oh, they're like, fragrance-free organic dishwasher tabs, but they're in that little plastic coating. And now I like run the dishwasher and I just picture this plastic shooting out all over my dishes. So I got to get rid of those
Oh
next.
gosh, the more you know, it really it's like it just comes back to haunt you. It's
kind
terrible.
of ruins stuff, doesn't it? A little bit. And same thing with like the
Yeah.
Stanley mug. I was like, what about Stanley mug? Okay.
People love those.
People are
I love
freaking out
those.
about
Since keep your
Stanley.
stuff
Yeah.
cold, they're stainless steel. And they just had like, I don't know, there's a lawsuit going because there's lead in the seal at the bottom. But even the coating on the outside, now that's not the part you're drinking out of. That's the seal between the, it's unless you destroy the thing, you're probably not going to get exposed to that. But the coating on the outside, I'm like, what is this colorful coating that makes it so, beautiful and this beautiful aesthetic? It's a powdered PFA thermoplastic. So it's like, oh, so the inside is this, but the contact, yeah, and the wearing that down. And then also you've got plastic straw in it. And if you're drinking hot drinks, you're probably having some plastic leaching. And so it's like, we've got to do better. I mean, there's got to be better out there. And that's really where kind of like I started with was doing all of the testing. And then I found that. And then I started talking to manufacturers. And I was like, can I test your products? Because I really just wanted to build a product line for my own house and my kids that was free of all of this stuff. And some of them were like, yeah, sure, order samples and you can send them to a lab and let us know like too what you get back. And so I started doing that. And then friends started asking, like, when I was talking to them about it, like, wait, can I get that? Can I get that? And I thought, okay,
Can
it
we
sounds
get
like
that?
there's, yeah,
Yeah.
you know, maybe I should start a brand. So that's something I'm working on now, actually, is launching a brand that is sustainably sourced, ethically sourced, compostable materials, PFA free, and tested at an EPA grade lab, to ensure that there's not these sorts of toxins in a home line of products.
Oh my gosh,
So,
put us
That's
on the wait list. I want to be at the
yeah.
very top. I need all of this.
Yeah.
I haven't really done the deep dive into the kitchen stuff, but I've been trying to source better clothing material, and it's just so hard. All the yoga pants have plastic in them. It's very hard to find cotton, or if you do, it's blended with something else. It's just our clothing. And then you think about all the tight, I wear tight stuff. Like, look, I have a bodysuit on. I'm just breathing it in all day long. So,
Oof.
happy to at least start
yeah.
with the household kitchen stuff.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think if it's touching our mouths or it's something we're eating off of, that should be regulated. And in like
Yeah.
Ireland, they actually have like regulatory boards for these sorts of things for housewares, where it's like you can't have
Mm,
these things. And when there's emerging science coming out, then they're banning it from production and they're creating manufacturing processes and regulations that fit to whatever the current and most recent science is on what's healthy and not. We were just, I think, a bit delayed here.
yeah.
And there's not transparency in regards to what products utilize for, manufacturing. So I think that's the next thing we need to go through. Because I know the EPA is creating a task force because they're seeing so much of these PFAs in the ground soil. And even like what the firemen spray to stop a fire is essentially full of these sorts of chemicals. Then it gets into the soil, it gets into the drinking water, and the EPA now has to make sure that that gets out of the drinking water for human consumption, right? Which is another reason to have
Yeah.
a home filtration system for your water. And I mean, the Washington Post
Yeah.
just came out with an article talking about how PFAs and microplastics are now being found in breast milk. So it's not just stopping with us; it's continuing on to the next generation without us having this ability to keep this sort of out of our systems. And it wreaks havoc on the fertility of humans and is going to be a bigger issue if we don't start doing something. So,
For
Yeah.
sure.
I want
For
to know
sure.
exactly how it's harming fertility, but I'm curious first, what do you see in, if you've cross-referenced with EWG and their reportings of what's standardized or clean? Do you find what you've sent to the lab aligns with EWG reports?
yeah, I mean, I'm not sure about EWG. I pulled a lot from Europe. And is that from Europe? Is that you're talking? Yeah, I don't remember the acronym, but I was
No,
think
looking at a
it's
lot of.
American.
yeah, it's a
Okay.
US based
I'll
environmental
have to
working
look and
group.
compare there. I know this was about a year ago when I was doing a lot of this research, and I was comparing what I found in regulations to the US to what I was finding in Europe, and specifically found Ireland was more stringent on certain things. It was
Yeah.
also about high borosilicated glass, like using soda lime glass, which is natural, versus a high like borosilicated glass, which contains certain chemicals that allow the glass to like shrink and release, which protects it from breakage more easily, but also is being considered potentially hazardous as well. And that's almost all of the glassware here in the US is like that too. So I kind of get really deep into the weeds on what is going into all of these products and who is caring about this. But I will have to look into EWG and get my head back into that, because I think it was maybe 8 or so months ago that I was deep diving.
Okay.
Hmm.
What are the
Yeah.
chances that my porcelain coffee mug has plastic around it as I sip out of it?
Is there
Yeah,
What's my fate?
porcelain.
is there print on it?
No, there's no print, but it is kind of glossy, a little bit.
Yeah, possibly. I haven't really looked into porcelain, but I think that's an interesting one too. Also,
Hmm.
China, I think it'd be interesting to look at that, because that's more, I think porcelain probably safer than glass or any of these coated water bottles out there.
Yeah. So even the
Yeah.
glass water bottles are a risk factor.
I mean, that's according to standards that I was reading coming out in Europe, that there were, active meetings happening and discussions happening as of last summer about what is in the glass too. because there are, I mean,
Mm,
what is it? Pyrex went through their change
mhm.
because they were using some material that would allow like better adaptability between temperatures. But in order for glass to do that, there's other things added to it that make that, a possibility without it shattering. So some of these
Yeah.
protective things, I mean, we love plastic because it is so versatile. It has, it's plastic. Like we say, neuroplasticity means we can have change within our brain. There's more flexibility with the brain. It's also true about the actual material plastic. Like there's more flexibility and usability and durability
Yeah.
because it doesn't break down. But then there's the downside to that. And I think that's what we're all starting to look into in these different organizations, within different governments are starting to look into, and it's all very new. So I think more and more will
Yeah.
come out, because it was BPA. We were like, BPA, no BPA. But now it's like, but what about PFAs? Like that's a lot larger. And BPA is one specific thing, whereas PFAs covers a whole host of different types of compounds. So,
Right.
and
Right.
they're ever evolving. So adding to
Mhm.
the list is going to be inevitably continuous. So
Mm.
Yeah.
It's
And
scary.
and there's
Thank
a
you for this
reason they
work.
call them forever chemicals because they're hard to get rid of.
yeah, they don't break down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, just real quick, circling back to the Pyrex. So did they fix that? Is Pyrex okay now?
I think they got rid of it and switched to soda lime in the US actually, because my
Okay.
mom, I remember my mom complaining too. And she's like, when I was telling her about this last year, she's like, oh yeah, when Pyrex changed their formulas and now they shatter and, and that's
I've
because I think
heard
they got
that.
rid of some of those chemicals that are in there, or not chemicals, but compounds that allow that flexibility, which does
Okay.
make them less durable, but does make them more healthy. Right. So
Yeah, because
Mm.
actually,
that's a compromise, and I think people choosing what
yeah.
they'd like to self-select is fine, but also visibility into what is being put into them so that you can self-select which direction you want to go is important.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Our mom had actually told me like years ago, and I didn't really understand why. She said, when you take the Pyrex out of the fridge, let it get to a little bit of a room temperature before you throw it in like a 400-degree oven because it will shatter. And I never really thought more about like, oh, why is that? But that makes so much sense. But anyways, okay. So
Huh.
Pyrex
Yeah.
is maybe okay
Thanks,
now.
Mom.
Thanks, mom.
Yeah.
Um, so circling back to like the fertility connection, I think this is really interesting. There's a test, I don't know if you're familiar with it, Clockwise, created by Dr. Catherine Zagoni. Lauren and I did this test about a year ago, and I thought it was really interesting that I came up pretty high with like phthalates, parabens, like a lot of these toxins. And I'm like, oh my, but I live like a toxic free lifestyle. So I thought, so it's really interesting to hear like some of these hidden things that you're talking about. And I'm going to do some more research on this. But anyways, I think that test is really interesting if someone wants to see what's going on in your body. But they do that because of the connection to fertility. So maybe you can share a little bit more like what kind of research are you seeing with that? Because there's obviously a
Yeah.
huge decline happening.
They've been doing studies on both long chain and short chain PFAS or PFAs, and they find that they like basically disrupt normal reproductive function in women by altering hormone secretion and fertility and reducing sperm count in men. The study I can send you guys over, I read it, was in European news, but was essentially found that higher levels of PFAS in blood of would-be mothers were associated with up to 40% lower chances of pregnancy and conception. So that's really, there's several studies now on it. It's kind of becoming like really well researched, which is why I think like the EPA is starting to take action in regards to groundwaters. That's a current thing that's been taking place, is they're trying to find, they have a task force that's getting together and coming up with ideas like how do we eradicate PFAs or PFAS from our ground soil. And that's not really an answered question yet. It's just a question mark, knowing that this is harmful. There's enough research behind it showing it's harmful. So what do we do about it and how do we get rid of it? So I can send you some studies, but it's altering that. And then for men, it's altering sperm count. Like I think the biggest thing for me that was like fertility in men or sperm count in men in 2050. I Googled that and someone said, Google this. And I Googled that and it said 0. Like, and I was like, this is crazy. Can't be true. But there were some books that came out. There was a ton of research in the books that were talking about how sperm count has dropped once the introduction of plastics happened in the 80s, from the 70s to now. And the decline is showing such a consistent decline that for these particular writers of the book that were doctors, they were saying that sperm count will drop to zero. Now, I don't know if that's true, but I just know if you Google it, you're going to see some things. And
I
to
think
me, it's just an eye opener.
possible. Yeah. And actually, I will say
I
for
wanna Google it.
men, Google it.
Google
For
it.
men, I think as biohackers, for the men out there, I think testing your sperm is actually a really great test to see what's going on, whether you're trying to get pregnant or not. It's kind of like a sign of vitality. And I know I can't think of the name of the company, but you can just order a test online. They'll send it to your house. You can check. It sounds weird, but you can just check your sperm at home, send it off to the lab, and they'll give you count, motility, morphology. And it can be really good insight as to what's going on in the body.
Yeah. And for men
I'll
too,
link to that in the show notes, but
yeah, testosterone too is being shown to like be decreasing at a rapid rate, and estrogen in men is increasing, and we have testosterone dominance in women, and we have like all of these hormone imbalances that weren't a thing, 40 years ago. And this is what they're claiming is the reason. Did you Google it, Lauren?
I pulled it up so I wouldn't forget, but I didn't open it because it's going to be a deep dive here.
Yeah.
But basically, I'm kind of loosely seeing that it's cut in half over the last 40 years. It's going to continue dropping. Yeah, it's going to be basically non-existent by 2050, like you said.
Right. And so I think that's why our government agencies are starting to take it really seriously. I just think that now we need to hold manufacturers and product developers accountable to kind of adapt to this so that we can do what we can to protect human health and our fertility and our reproductive systems and our hormone cycles, which has downstream impact on our metabolic health and everything else. So
longevity. So where do people start? Like, do you maybe have like a top 5 things you should do to clean up your environment or something?
Yes. Number 1, dump your plastics. Those Tupperwares, I know it's easy, but the Ziploc bags, go to Sprouts or something and get the beeswax coated paper bags, or utilize jars. I've got our kids using metal bento boxes for their lunches instead of the convenient plastic, snap and goes. There's a lot of development with stainless steel you can utilize in lieu of plastics. That would be the first one, is dump your plastics. The second would be to filter your water at home. Set either, and to not be drinking out of plastic water bottles, because yes, it's filtered, but now you're getting a different type of plastic in your system. So filter your home water system. And I would say number 3 is to essentially start looking. It's hard. It's hard to find products that are not using plastics in their materials, because this is all very newly emerged evidence and scientific information. So I think that when that happens, there has to be visibility and sort of adoption in regards to regulation first before companies start to adapt their processes. And that hasn't happened yet. So it's going to be very hard to find natural products that are honest. I know, like women's period panties or menstrual underwear, everyone kind of adopted Thinks for a while and then found like there's a bunch of plastics in Thinks. And now there's women switching to bamboo, options. I really love Salt Co. As a period panty brand, because they're plastic free. Haven't sent them into the lab.
Oh, not familiar.
Okay.
Haven't sent them into the lab, but Salt Co. is a good one.
Look that one up.
Yeah, but get it away from, your private areas that are the most susceptible, and start looking and start writing companies. Like that helps too. I know it sounds like a lot of work, but if they know that it matters, then they will start figuring out how to adapt to what consumers are demanding. So those would be my top 3.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. And when can we expect your company to be available? I need it yesterday, because I'll just tell you some context. I'm traveling right now, and I've been in hotels, and water has been my biggest source of frustration right now. Like getting water to my hotel room. Cause even if I go to Whole Foods, like the spring water is always in plastic bottles, like
Mhm.
anywhere I try to source it. And people are like, just carry a water bottle and fill it up. And I'm like, I'm filling it up from a plastic water dispenser. Like, and there's no way around it unless I travel with a filtration system, which is kind of difficult to do because I have limited baggage. I'm flying. It's really tricky.
Absolutely. I'd love it if a company like Grail, which I don't know if you've seen those, but they're like a water bottle for hikers that you scoop and then you put this in and the straw is a filtration system. I would love it
Yeah.
if they switched from using plastic in their manufacturing to using stainless steel. That would be amazing. And
Maybe I will
silicone.
write them today.
Yeah,
What's the
let's
name of the
write
company?
Grail.
I
Like
have
Grail.
one. I have one of those, and like I don't know why I've been afraid to use it. Like
the concept is a little creepy. It's just like, I just got this out of a lake. Let's drink it. You know, you're like,
yeah, yeah. I'm like, I don't want
Yeah,
to find
delicious
out.
parasite water.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But yeah, that's an interesting experiment that could be done is like parasite testing after using a Grail for a set period of time on natural, groundwaters and things.
Yeah.
Hotels are hard. Traveling is hard because you're going to get what's in your hotel room. Yeah, there's water. It's in plastic. And when you go out, it's mostly plastic. I mean, occasionally you can find something like this, but as we know, even with aluminum cans, they're lined with a BPA-free plastic liner on the inside. Like that is how they keep the steel the aluminum from getting rusted. So it's
Oh.
really
But a lesser
hard
evil
to-
potentially.
Yeah, it's a lesser
Yeah.
evil for sure, for sure. But yeah, travel I would say is the hardest thing, and I honestly haven't fully figured that out. I do like Mountain Spring that come in the green glass bottles. Mountain Valley, that's it. That's a good one. Topo Chico is great because they come in glass again. We don't do a very good job here in the US about recycling glass. Our systems aren't set up to be able to recycle glass easily, even if you're a really good recycler yourself. So I'd say that's an area we should systemically work to improve on.
I'm
yeah,
so torn because I try to buy the Mountain Valley, but then I'm like, oh gosh, the glass is just going to a glass landfill. And I'm like, oh, it feels irresponsible, but like I'm choosing myself first. And then it keeps me up at night.
Hard to win. It's really hard to
Yeah.
win. We need systemic change in order to support the changes that we're making in our lifestyle. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking to launch by sometime in June. And the brand is called Earth and Aesthetic because really the point of the brand for me was like, this is meant to be sustainable for the earth without compromising on aesthetic. You can make beautiful things that are also healthy and safe. And that's really just kind of my own thoughts of encompassing like how beautiful sustaining nature is, as well as making products that look beautiful and help our bodies. So
That's awesome.
I'm so excited for this. So excited. So when that happens, let us know and we'll push that out to our audience. But we're so grateful to talk to you today. I mean, we originally connected around blood sugar and mental health, and with the Good Idea drinks, which is the blood sugar support. And it's just so amazing to hear about your biohacking journey. And thank you for sharing all of this with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a blast with the babes, I will say.
Thank you.
Yeah, this was so fun. I learned a lot and I feel like I have some homework, but I really, really appreciate all that.
I have more tabs open. You just gave me like a little homework to do for sure.
Yeah.
Where can our audience find more of you?
Yeah, you can write me at hello@erynknight.com, or you can visit me on Instagram at the Eryn Knight. And then eventually we will be, probably in the next week or so, getting a preliminary website up that would be earthandaesthetic.com if you'd like to sign up for sort of preview of the product and things like that too.
Beautiful.
Great.
Thank you.
We will link to that in the show notes for everybody. And Eryn, any final piece of advice you'd like to leave our audience today? Maybe something they should start doing right away to optimize their health.
Yeah, I think the first thing is if you are going through any issues, whether it's mental health, fertility, or otherwise, don't blame your body. First, look to your environment. Trust your body. It's a machine that's ready to heal. It's there and it's ready to support you. It's not a matter of you doing things wrong. It's a matter of the environment that we're in these days and how much exposure we have to all sorts of environmental and stress and food toxicity and all of these different things. So give yourself some grace. This is my first advice. Second is we have the ability to drive health changes utilizing data. So if you need help on any of that, reach out. I'm sure the babes have so many tips for you. I'm here. But a CGM, aura, testing of, hormones, things like that, so that you can start to pull the picture together, or get coaches who can support that, like the biohacking babes who are here to help. Just because navigating it on your own is a lot. I'm thankful and very blessed that I had a lot of people around me who were already really well into this space when I first started going on this journey. So I had a lot of help and I didn't do it on my own. So trust yourself and lean into community and get support where you need it.
I love
Excellent. We love that. And thank you for your support.
Thank
It's
you.
teamwork. Can't do it
Yes.
alone.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you guys so much
Amazing.
for having me.
Yeah, this was
Yes,
so
it was
much
so
fun.
fun. We did
Thanks,
it.
Eryn.
Yeah.
Yay.
You guys.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks to everyone that tuned in today. We will see you next time.